Welcome. Welcome to the Burgundy and Gold Knuckleheads podcast. And as always, through thick and thin, it's my main man, Reggie. What's going on, Reg?
What's going on, man? At the end of the day, I ain't going nowhere. So I'm
Yeah,
always gonna be right here, man.
I know. It will celebrate together and we'll suffer together, right?
Because today is one of those days where it's testing the loyalty. That's for sure. Uh,
Yes.
at the game like today, man, this is, whoo, boy, this is what, week 11. This is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, this is bad, man. This is real bad, brother. Um, I will just start this off, and I know you're going to kind of get into a little bit of stats, but my confidence number that I gave on the last podcast was a 5, and you were like, "Well, why?" And I said I gave you some reason, and I said
Right.
one of those reasons was this is the Washington thing to do. They would go and lose to a team like the New York Giants, who's pretty much, in my opinion, is not very good. Only had 2 wins on the year. One of those came against us and was playing their third string quarterback, and they had a plethora of injuries. And yet, at home, a Washington team, for all intents and purposes, fully healthy, would struggle against the New York Giants team. But not only did we struggle, we actually lost the game. We lost every home game except for the home opener week 1.
Yeah.
So this is a tough one, man. This is a tough one to swallow.
I will say I'm glad I wasn't at the game. I was at the game that we just got throttled by Chicago Bears. Um, I really don't even feel like going over stats. The only stat that really matters in this game at the end of the day is the scoreboard stat, 31-19. Um, if you told me that we were going to give up 31 points to the worst team, offensive team in the NFL, I could, I would be skeptical that we were going to lose the game. Obviously, when I talk about the previous one, to think that we were like fighting and hoping and something's going to change, right? Something's going to change. We're going to get into a groove, and just never did. Anytime that we started to get in a groove and we'd have a drive going, there'd be a turnover. There was, along with turnovers, 6 turnovers. There was just some knucklehead plays out there that you scratch your head and go, what is going on? One that I'll use as an example is when there was a few minutes left, we were going down to try to score a touchdown, threw a ball to B Rob. He's 4 or 5 yards from the sideline, get your yards to get out of bounds. But instead, he decides to cut in and ends up fumbling the ball. Now, that's one of them that we recovered. But it's like, why? Why are you doing this? This isn't your first game. You got coached through high school. You got coached through college. You've been coached in the pros, and you still don't know to get out of bounds instead of picking up an extra 3 yards when your enemy is the clock. The enemy is the scoreboard and the clock.
Right.
And that's one example, but there was like continual things like that throughout the game that you just scratched your head. On the positive note, which was a head scratcher, Eric Bieniemy decided to run the ball today, 25 times, 139 yards. That's just the running backs. I didn't include Howell on some of his plays. So, we had 139 yards on 25 carries. That's over 5 yards a carry. Very productive. And then even so, okay, we are running the ball very well. And Eric Bieniemy on 4th and 1 towards the end of the game calls a quarterback scramble for Howell. Just hand it to B-Rob. He has been pounding it all day. Thankfully, there was an offsides by the Giants. They kept us in the game. But it was like, I don't understand. I understand some of it, but every time you thought things might be on track, there was a head scratcher coming, whether it was a turnover, whether it was a decision of the play calling. It was just a very frustrating game from beginning to end. Um, it was an ugly game as a fan. It was an ugly game.
It it certainly was. I would be remiss to say, folks, that after our first Giants game, I essentially said, you know what, I already know where this is going to go, and I decided to try to check my emotions out of it. Um, Today is Kids Day. If you haven't noticed, we we
It's not
hit play.
bad.
Hold
Normally,
on, hold on, hold on, hold on,
yeah, go
hold
ahead.
on, hold on. We hit play, and my man Ken just let it all out. I mean, get it off your chest, homie. I mean, because you should. I understand. I understand, right? This was an awful, awful game for us to lose, and I felt like we should have won the first game, and
Look,
we had the upper hand in the first game, and yet we
right.
only scored 7 points, held the Giants to 14. We scored seven, and it was a terrible game. So coming into this game, everything was lining up for a Washington victory.
Right.
But I know the team that I root for, and I was like, I don't know. I need to see it to believe it. And so your confidence was pretty high, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for this team to come out at home and pretty much lose the game in the manner in which they lost it, I understand your feelings, your frustration, and how you feel. But I just want people to know the second loss to the Giants put you in the same mode or very similar situation as it did me. But I will say this: the word that comes out of this game, if you want to say what's one word to describe this game, that word is going to be turnover. Turnover, turnover.
Yeah, I don't know if we lost you, Reggie. Your screen has, I don't mean to be talking over you. I don't know if you can hear me, but your screen has locked up. And I'll continue on. Turnover, turnover. I
Turnover.
heard, okay.
Did you
You
hear
were
me?
frozen there, so I didn't know if I could hear you there, Reggie.
Okay.
Um,
So I'll go back and just say what I was saying. I was just commenting on the fact that you mentioned that every time we would go forward, something would happen. And here was a situation where Washington had six turnovers, whether it was fumbles. And listen, the Giants were aggressive in their defense, so they
yeah.
created these opportunities. The B Rock getting back in bounds, the Logan Thomas with the ball. The Giants was punching the ball out, and they did what they needed to do to give their offense extra possessions. Um, but six turnovers. But if I had told you that Washington would sack the opposing quarterback 9 times, you think, man, we have a lot of chance to be able to win this game. And from a statistical standpoint, we were winning the game. I mean, at one point, the Giants had no rushing yards.
Right.
In the first half, they had no rushing yards. And then they come out in the second half, and it was just become some this Saquon Barkley show. I don't know what he ultimately finished the game rushing, but the rushes he had in the second half were killers.
Well, he did. He
Kept,
did.
kept,
I mean, he got all of his yardage. He got 90% of his yardage on like 3 carries.
okay.
Right. Um, and then even on top of that, again, we're talking about turnovers. We're talking about bad plays. There was a couple very easy catchable balls that were dropped today. There was an extra point that was missed. And then when you add all that in with you're having a turnover more than once a quarter, um, you just got to be looking and going, man, what can we do right today? The only thing that we did right consistently was run the ball. And we'll see what happens. As I look at we're at 4 wins. I don't know that we're going to win another game this year, Reggie. I don't want to tank. I want us to keep fighting and playing hard. But when you look at, we still got to play the Cowboys twice. You got to play the Dolphins and you got to play the 49ers. My heart tells me I want to beat the Cowboys twice without a doubt. But
Right.
realistically, that's 4 losses. And then your easier games is the Rams. At the Rams, you got to travel all the way across the country for that. And then you got to play the Jets, which they're struggling offensively, but they got a good defense.
They sure do. Hell of a defense.
And so where is one more win? As it sits right now, that I'd have to go look to verify, but I'd be willing to bet that 4 wins gives you a top 5 pick. And hey, I'll take a top 5 pick. Don't get me wrong, but I would have never thought at the beginning of the season we would be in a position to be a top 5 pick when we have had basically no major injuries at all this season.
Yes. So going back to that, just briefly, we'll mention that FL Bottle got hurt. He was carted off. He had the air cast on his leg, on his right leg. He was carted off. I hope that all of that was just for precautions, and I hope that his injury is not as bad as it looked from a standpoint, because they didn't show us the replay, and so we didn't get to see it. We just saw him on the cart and the with the air cast. So I hope again that was just for stability and precautions.
Right.
But you mentioned when we were watching the game is that all of a sudden we get a major injury at a position that we're now suddenly thin at because we traded away Montez and Chase.
Right.
Then of course during the game, Forbes get injured, but he returns. Percy Butler get injured, he returns. So I was very grateful and thankful for that. But the Giants scored 31 points today, right? That was tied for their second highest score this season. The only other time they scored 31 points was, I think, week 2 against the Arizona Cardinals.
Right.
Prior to that, they had not gotten anywhere near that. So we allowed them to put up with their third string quarterback. We allowed them to put up their tie for their highest point total this season. The other thing that I want to mention here that in this game is we talked about it while we were watching the game, and I noticed it early on, and then as the game went on, I think you guys started to see it as well. It was very clear to me that there was a change in offensive philosophy. Fans, media, everyone has been questioning why the heavy pass offense and the lack of runs. And although it was great to see, for it to have switched in the manner in which it did against the New York Giants, I have to question what changed. What was said this week leading up to this game for Eric Bieniemy to change his offensive philosophy in the manner in which he did? Not only was 25 runs, Ken, there were times in the game where it was, to me, an obvious passing down. It was an obvious passing down in which in weeks past he would have passed, but instead he ran the ball. Am I against running the ball because I've been screaming for it? Not at all. But I'm just very intrigued as to what changed. What changed? Because again, there were times in this game where this should have been a pass play, but we ran the ball.
Right.
So will he pack that game plan the rest of the year? I don't know. Will he pack that up and bring it to Dallas for Thursday's game? I don't know. I do like a little bit of the balance, but it's almost like he went to the extreme and didn't pass the ball when he probably should have, and he chose to run, and he ran the ball when he should have. But it was just an interesting observation on my part that I thought I saw early on in the game, and I'm like, something's different here, man. And I don't know who's gotten in the ear. I don't know if it was just watching tape, and he thought that was the best way to stifle the Giants defense. I don't know, but it was an obvious. And I hope that the beat reporters and the people that get to talk to these guys ask them the questions. It's going to be a short week, so they may not address it very much because they're going to be on to Dallas type of a situation. But I'm very curious as to what took place there.
Yeah, as you're talking there, I agree everything what you're saying about this strategy. But as I'm looking here, I'm looking at a few of the stats. One that just kind of stood out a little bit was first downs, right? We'd be moving the ball some. We might be struggling, but then we'd have a turnover. So it was a drive stopper, obviously. Washington had 28 first downs. New York scored 31 points. And you got to think of a drive, right? A 8 or 10 play drive. You might pick up 3 or 4 first downs, 5 first downs before you get a touchdown. The entire game, they had 13 first downs on all their drives. 13. and
But
they
that
scored,
does. But that's not.
and they scored, but and they scored
That's
30
not
more points.
surprising, Ken. That's not surprising when we had turnovers and gave them short field position. There was a lot of times we gave them
Absolutely,
short field
absolutely.
position.
But I mean, it just shows you how, because of the turnovers and the way the game played out, how obscure you almost just throw out the numbers, right? Other than the big numbers of turnovers and the score. This is a game where you throw numbers back and forth, bouncing them off the wall, and it looks like a lotto machine because they just don't make sense when you see the score versus the stats.
Well,
You
here's
know,
the thing.
a lot of
If you had walked into, you had just been dropped on this earth from somewhere, and you walk in and you start watching the Giants Commanders game today, and you know nothing about either team, you know nothing about their records. The way that game was going, you would swear that the Giants were the better team, right? And here it turns out that, well, the way they was creating their turnovers, the way they was dominant. I mean, absolutely, there was nothing that told me that Washington should have been the favorite to win that game. They were outplaying us. They were creating the turnovers. They was getting the big play. Wide receivers open down the field, wide open. Then Tommy DeVito sitting here standing in the pocket, seemed like he got 10 seconds to go through his progressions to read. And it was just a different way that they were playing compared to the way we were playing. But I will say this: the Giants now are 3-8. Two of their wins came against Washington.
correct,
They've only beat one of the team. That was Arizona.
right?
So they beat Arizona and Washington twice. That's their record this year. Those are their wins. But yet, for some reason, I don't know what it is, man. The way we play Philadelphia is the way the Giants play and beat Washington. It is the craziest thing. But we're two games away from being swept in the division once again.
Yeah.
And this is unbelievable. I don't even know what to say, man. But this is unbelievable.
Well, I mean, I kind of disagree. You talked about dropping, just not knowing anything about the game and watching the game. I mean, if you outside of the turnovers, and turnovers are huge. I'm not downplaying turnovers. If it's just one turnover, it might not be that big of a deal. But when you have six, it's extremely hard, near impossible to overcome six turnovers. But I mean, Washington scored. I'm sorry, total yards was over 100 yards more than they had. Time of possession, we had the ball an additional 10 minutes than they did. Number of plays, I think we had, what was it? Total plays was our 77 to their 54, right? So we
Okay, let
had
me ask
more
you this
than
though.
20 plays.
Let me
Now,
ask you this.
go ahead.
Before you looked up those numbers, did you believe we had more time possession, more plays, and more yardage? Because here's the thing, we gave them a lot of short fields, so they didn't need to get a lot of yardage. Okay. And if you watch the game, they seemed to drop back when they weren't getting sacked, and Tommy DeVito was able to throw to all of their receivers. We seem to struggle moving the ball. We seem to struggle to get points, right? So although we had more yards, more time possession, the game looked like it flowed a lot easier for New York than it did for us. So again, if I'm coming in for the first time, I'm thinking those guys dressed in black, they're not as good as those guys over there. That's the way I would have saw it because again, it looked a lot easier for New York. And to your point, I know when you look at the statistics, it looks different. It doesn't tell the story because again,
Absolutely.
short fields, you don't need to go long drives. We did a lot of long drives, and it was hard trying to get points
Right.
today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
No, I agree. They part of it is because they did have short fields. I agree with that part. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't know that they had an actual long drive, right? All their drives for points might have been, who knows, 50 yards or less. But I don't think they, no more than one time did they start at their own 20-yard line as example and go down and score. Washington
probably
consistently,
not.
and one of the things that kind of surprised me was all that pressure that they were putting on um, DeVito, that to his credit, he didn't turn the ball over. I mean, there really wasn't even one where we were like, "Oh man, we should have caught that one," right?
Yeah,
He threw the ball away, or he completed the pass, or he got sacked, and it worked, right? Because of all our mistakes, it worked for them. At
absolutely,
the end of the
absolutely.
day, it was an ugly game. If I'm a Giants fan, I'm happy that we won, but they got to say, man, that was an ugly win. But you take any win you can get, um, especially in today's NFL. But as of right now, there's no way we don't have a top 10 pick. Um, and if we lose to the Cowboys, there may be a little bit less patience. I know I'm not the only one that's going to be saying that. Um,
Less patience from who?
from ownership.
Think so?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of making major offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach changes during the season. Um, but I don't know. There are most teams that make changes don't necessarily get better, but it sends the message that we're not going to be able, we're not putting up with this, right? We're not
Well, if you were to make the in-season change, all it does is allow you to get a head start on your searches.
right.
To your point, it doesn't mean that the team's going to get better, those types of things, but it just gives you a head start on your search. I was talking about it a little bit earlier during the game actually, and I said, although the coaching staff will not be here, I'm convinced of it. I'm
Correct.
also willing to say that they deserve to be relieved of their duties. But my gut tells me that Josh Harris is not going to make this move during the season. I believe that he even believes that we should do something, but I don't think it's in his nature to make these types of moves in season. So all the only thing that's happening now is if he was wondering what he should do, I'm pretty sure he's decided that he knows what he's going to do now. But my gut tells me there would be no in-season firing. Although if he was to do it, I don't think anyone would be shocked or surprised or even say that it's not necessary. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
When it comes to the coaches.
Yeah. Like I said,
What
time will tell. I don't think anybody, including the coaching staff, believe they'll be back next year.
probably not. Probably not.
They know they're not getting, and they may feel like they're doing the best job that they can. You can have whatever excuse. You can blame it on the players. You can blame it on the GMs. You can blame it on the coaches. You can blame it on whoever. But everybody on this team at this point knows that they're not living up to expectations.
Yeah.
And nobody had these teams slotted as a uh, Super Bowl team by any means, but they didn't expect you to win 4 or 5 games for the season either. So
Well, I guess Vegas knows, man, because I had us as a 9-win team, and we're not going to touch that. And I think Vegas had us at six and a
six and a
half
half, six and a
in
half.
terms of wins, and at this point, we might not even get to six. So,
I think there's a lot of Washington fans that probably are going to end up losing money on that bet because I would say at six and a
most
half,
fans.
yeah, at 6.5, I would say most fans that put a bet, Washington fans that put a bet on that, bet the over. Um,
Oh yeah, oh
I,
yeah.
I didn't have us winning more than 7 games, but I'm sorry, I didn't have us winning more than 8. I figured we were a 7 or 8 win team, and part of that was because of the tough schedule. But our play, uh, our play isn't helping ourselves at all. I can't blame this on the schedule. When you lose to the Giants twice, when
No,
you lose to um,
Chicago.
Chicago, when your wins are squeaking out against bad teams, um, yeah, it
No, this ain't a schedule issue. This
correct,
is not a
correct,
schedule issue.
correct. So
So one last thing, one bright spot out of today's game was the emergence of KJ Henry. Granted, you could say that it's the old line he was playing against, but if nothing else, we saw a little bit of bright spot from him as an edge rusher. We even saw some bright spots with David Mayo. I don't think it's going to change who we believe David Mayo is, but he was productive today, and so we're going to give him his props for the sacks that he had today. So
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean,
man,
like I said,
tough loss.
Yeah, I mean, if you go play to play, there were some positives, but when I'm breaking it down for the game,
Sorry about that.
yeah, if you break it down for the entire game as entire units, yeah, it was not pretty. It was not pretty.
Terrible.
Yeah. Anything else you got before we wrap this up?
No, man. I guess we got to wash this one and down the drain and move on to Dallas as our beloved team comes to our city. And I will just say this. I'll say this: if we win this game on Thursday, somehow we magically show up like we showed up in Philly and pull this upset against Dallas. At this point, it'll make the season worth it for me. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, we'll have a preview of this game, and yeah, right now it doesn't look good that Washington is going to come out ahead, especially since this is a fresh and raw loss to the Giants. But I will say, if there's a game that Washington has come out and won over the years, this is consistently when you thought that they had no hope, it's against the Cowboys, right? If you go back, we beat the Cowboys with a third string quarterback before when they were a Super Bowl contending team. We've beat them on the last play of the game with no time left when the game was over, and because of a fluke play, Sean Taylor picks up the ball, runs, gets face masked, no time left on the clock. It's a dead play. Kick that for a field goal. We can go on and on. Santana Moss, 2 touchdowns in the final handful of minutes when we had no offense whatsoever. You never know. You never know when you're playing the Cowboys. So we'll be talking about that in the next day or so. There'll be another podcast dropped about that game because we all feel the same about the Cowboys. Cowboys. So
it is what it is. That's all I got, man.
Well, very good, very good. Until we throughout the next podcast, I appreciate it, everybody. Follow us on Twitter. Reach out to us. Let us know how you're hurting as well. Peace out, knuckleheads.
Peace out.